Rise of Hawk, Part 5, Scene 5. Later that evening at Rose Road. Asha was slowly putting together a herb tea with one arm when Dobert strode through the front door of the Rose Road safe house. He had a look of determination in his vivid blue eyes. It needs to be postponed until the 19th. Asha put a scoop of herb tea into the teapot and frowned sideways at him. Why? It's a 10-year anniversary of the Rise of Hawk, he smirked. Call it poetic timing. She snorted. He wasn't the type to focus on poetic anything. No, really. Why? I need more time. She sensed regret, even though there was no shift in his expression. You're not going to do anything unwise, are you? Like, make Wolf an orphan? I haven't decided, he sighed. Either way, I need more time. Let's just leave it at that. She shrugged. All right. He approached her and lifted the kettle from out of her hand. Let me do this for you. Turning from the bench, she sat down at the little table and absently put her free hand over the aching collarbone. So, he looked sideways at her as he poured hot water into the teapot. Is Raha's program finished? She shrugged with one shoulder. Yeah, should be done any minute. I'll go and get it later. He said the file will take some time to recompile on the other end, but it should work a doozy. Dobert smiled. That's good. Tell him thank you. Of course. She cleared her throat. So, can I finally tell him about Toma? No, Asha. He finished pouring hot water into the teapot and put the kettle down. I shouldn't have told you in the first place. Tom is more at risk of discovery than I am in all of this. Raha can be told about his cousin when it's time for Tom to escape and not before. Right, she sighed. She didn't have the energy to argue with him. Dobert lifted the teapot and 2 mugs onto the table and sat down opposite. He looked across the table at her, and there was a different expression in his eyes. The edges of his mouth twitched upwards slightly. It meant he was excited about something. So, what else is going on? A grin burst into his face. I got Wolf today. That's great. How is he? An unveiled boyish joy lit his eyes. He's good. He made friends with a group of kids who kept him safe. Are they getting out too? He nodded. I'll do my best. I just have to get them all into one classroom, which might prove somewhat difficult. The eldest of the 6 is almost 2 years older than Wolf. She smiled. Have you hugged him yet? Dobert swallowed and looked down at his hands. I haven't been able to get him alone. Enigma wouldn't show affection, even to his son. It's difficult. Asha glared at him. I don't care if it's difficult. That boy needs love, and love comes from hugs and kisses and tickling. It comes from closeness, not distance. So you figure it out, even if you have to drop your Enigma face for 10 seconds. That boy needs to know you love him, especially if you're not coming back. He stared at her for a long moment. He closed his mouth and nodded. You're right. You're absolutely right. She winked at him. Of course I'm right. Now pour the tea. Scene 6. The 18th of Arakan. Dobert watched Wolf from the edge of the training mats. The combat gym roof was overly tall and wide compared to the other training areas of the tower. Its walls, floor, and angled ceiling were covered with wood panelling, and the lighting was set up in such a way that if one didn't look too hard, one could assume that the windows at ceiling height actually let in real sunlight. Someone had gone to a great deal of effort to create an atmosphere of not being in the tower, and it was for this reason that the room was one of Dobert's favourite places in the building. None of the children Wolf's age were any challenge for his advanced combat skills, but those at his level were at least 10 years his senior, and therefore legally too old to spar with him. The age and skill imbalance had caused a great deal of difficulty for Dobert, while he tried to source an appropriate interim sparring partner for his son. Wolf faced his opponent with a fierceness that surprised Dobert. His son had Sarah's stubbornness and Dobert's focus. It was a beautiful thing to behold from the perspective of a combat trainer. As a father, however, it still saddened him that his son essentially never had a childhood. The older boy, wearing a gi and belt 2 ranks up below Wolf's, looked afraid. Corner of Dobert's mouth lifted. That fear meant that Wolf had already won. The older boy went in for a sudden but off-target punch. Wolf deflected the strike and pulled him into a throw with barely a momentary shift in his footing. The older boy hit the training mats hard and lay on his back without getting up. He seemed to be winded, or perhaps overwhelmed by his own humiliation. David stepped into the territory of the training mat, and, still in his uniform navy blue suit, dodged in through Wolf's defences and went for a strike to the face. He felt the flicker static as the boy sensed the blow and dodged away. A much smaller fist flew back at David, but he adeptly evaded and redirected it. They sparred backward and forward for some minutes, testing each other's boundaries and style of combat. The boy had a good instinct, and fought with a confidence many people didn't develop until their mid-20s. David stepped back, dropping his arms out of their sparring position so the boy would know it was time to stop. He bowed formally. "Wolf?" "Dad?" The boy returned his bow. A touch of mischief played at the edges of his mouth. David smiled affectionately. "You'll have to train with me until we can find you a more suitable training partner." "Fine with me, Dad." Wolf said Dad like he couldn't possibly be said too many times, and David suppressed his grin. Wolf was cocky too. The older boy hadn't moved from the floor, and David glanced at him. "Naka, you can leave now." "Yes, sir." The young man got to his feet, bowed, and skittered quickly out of the room. When the door was closed, David glanced around him in an effort to sense if anyone was watching them or listening in digitally on the otherwise empty room. "We can talk this way. I can mask you." Wolf's voice rang with a sharp mental taste of a very tight private telepathic frequency. David nodded and took off his suit jacket. "Let's start slowly with the 20 primary Zeka moves, and go from there." The boy got into the first position and David into its mirror. They started the slow, dance-like series of positions that beginners were taught before they entered the sparring phase of their training. "Wolf, I'm getting you and your friends out of the tower, but I'll need your help." "What do you need me to do?" The boy performed a perfect roundhouse kick at 1/4 speed. "Keep your friends together." David captured the boy's leg with a deflecting Zeka and slowly spun him around with a twist of his body. "It's going to happen quickly, and anyone who's left behind will die." The boy adeptly flipped sideways and landed on his feet again. "The bombing?" David swallowed. "Yes, it's going to be bigger than I intended it to be, but it's still going ahead." "Are we going to become rebels?" Silver eyes shone at him from behind a slow jab punch. David smiled and redirected the jab sideways and down. "Yes, I may not be able to come, but you and your friends are going to be rebels." In his surprise, the boy failed to shift into the next position, breaking the flow of their movement. They both stepped back into the first position and started again. "Are you going to die with Jaran?" "I'm sorry, if I can't get someone to take my place, there won't be a choice." Wolf's mouth tightened. "I won't leave without you." "Son, I'm doing everything I can to come with you, but if I can't get someone else to do it, I must take their place." "You are not meant to die with Jaran." Wolf stepped back out of position, his arms down and fists clenched. "Father," his physical voice was clipped and very formal, "I need a bathroom break." David swallowed and bowed to allow their sparring to end. Wolf also bowed and turned away. Immediately, even at 10, he had already learned to keep up appearances despite his true emotions. He watched his little form leave the room and sighed. He had upset the boy. He didn't want to lie or manipulate his son, but it seemed he would need to learn a different kind of tact with him. David waited silently with his hands clasped behind his back, his body absolutely still. He knew Wolf was probably crying in the bathroom, but he couldn't go and find him without possibly revealing to someone else why he was crying. At his best guess, Wolf was gone for 30 minutes. When he returned, his little oval face was red and patchy, but his silver eyes were determined and not sad. "Close the door, son," David said quietly. The boy did as he was told. The moment the door clicked closed, David gently wrapped his arms around Wolf and lowered his shielding enough for him to sense his feelings. "I'm sorry for upsetting you, son. You deserve more than you've been given. You deserve a better father than I, and you deserve to have your mother. I love you. I will always love you. I will do everything in my power to come with you tomorrow. But you must promise me that you'll get yourself and your friends out of the building when I tell you. Yes? Yes, Dad. He lifted Wolf into his arms, opening his empathic shielding even more so the boy could sense the depth of his love for him. Wolf started to cry again and wrapped his arms around Dobed's neck. It's all right, son, he whispered. I'm here. Scene 7, 19th of Arakan, early morning, the day of the bombing, Aram Agency Tower. Toma Arya brushed a dark thread of hair from his eyes. He sat cramped in the little stationery cupboard adjacent to Dobed Cody's office. On the laptop screen in front of him, the code his cousin Raha had created for their purposes was 75% compiled. He wished it would hurry up. Today was not a day where slow computers were good things. He sighed. Not long now. Tom, is it done? He looked up from his laptop. Dobed stood in the doorway of the tiny cupboard-like office. The muscles in his face and shoulders were tense, but those amazing blue eyes of his were steady and calm. Tom smiled. Almost. Are you ready? Yes, he nodded. Everything else is on schedule. Do you have the last of those stickies? Tom lifted the manila folder from his desk and handed it to him. Of course. One corner of Dobed's mouth lifted. I'm going to miss you, old friend. He got to his feet and opened his arms wide. Dobed stepped into the hug. Me too, Tom grinned, but I won't miss the stickies. Dobed snorted. I'm not surprised. Their hugs separated, and Dobed smiled at him. All right. Do you need anything else before I go? No, I'm fine. Just be careful. Dobed turned in the doorway with a sideways smirk on his face. Always. The door in the main office closed, and Toma was alone again. He sighed. 10 years and 2 months they'd been working from that office, and it was about to be over. Toma had secretly penned thousands of yellow sticky notes for Dobed, whose handwriting was atrocious and easily recognisable. He certainly wouldn't miss the stickies, or the fear of discovery that had haunted him all these years, but he would miss Dobed's company and the rush of helping others get free of the agency. Toma turned back to his laptop. The program shouldn't take much longer to compile from Raha's text file. Its function was simple. To find the air conditioning systems for all of the undergraduate classes, particularly the kindergarten classes, on levels 8 and 9 of the tower, shut them off and register an unbreakable error message. He hoped his cousin was just as amazing with code on this project as he had always been. It wasn't that Tom doubted his cousin's ability, but a lot was riding on the success of the program, not the least of which were the lives of about 150 under 5-year-old children.